A birthday's just another day, she said. Funny, because to me, this one felt like my last real one. I didn't say anything at the time. Just smiled, nodded, and folded the napkin on my lap, careful not to let my hands shake. At 80 years old, you learn how to make your disappointment small enough to tuck behind your ribs. You learn how to sit at the dinner table with people who love you. In theory. Next month, I turn 80. I thought they'd at least bring cake. Maybe a little music. I wasn't asking for a banquet, just something sweet. Something that said, "We remember who you are." I'd even gone to the dollar store and picked out a silver balloon shaped like a number 8. I left it in the hallway, still deflated in its plastic packaging, just to see if anyone would ask about it. They didn't. It wasn't always like this. I raised my daughters on my own after Frank died in '78. I worked the church bookkeeping desk for 25 years, took in sewing jobs at night, and made sure there was always a warm supper. Chicken pot pie on Wednesdays, apricot squares every Sunday. When I got breast cancer in 2001, I told no one until after the surgery. I didn't want them to worry. I've outlived most of my friends. I still keep Christmas cards from them in a box under my bed. Some of them go back 30 years. Every now and then, I take them out just to remember that someone once thought of me first. A few days ago, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. They thought I was asleep. She'll probably want to fuss. Let's just keep it quiet and quick. Maybe just drop by with cupcakes, in and out. I stood in the hallway, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of lukewarm tea. Not moving, not breathing. Almost. I looked down at the foil balloon still waiting by the front door, and I realized I was waiting too, waiting to matter. That's when something in me began to shift. Not all at once, but like the slow turning of a tide. I wasn't angry, not yet. Just awake. I'll tell you the rest if you're still with me. If anything in this story touches your heart, please leave a message below. Sometimes a single comment can offer unexpected comfort. I wasn't always the woman standing quietly in the hallway, listening to her daughters speak in hushed tones like she couldn't hear. There was a time, no, a whole lifetime, when my name meant something. When Mom or Mrs. Carrington carried a little weight, a little warmth. People knew me from church mostly. I kept the treasury books at St. Luke's for 25 years. Every Sunday, rain or shine, I was there with my clipboard, my metal cash box, and a tray of apricot squares in a blue Pyrex dish. That's how folks remembered me. The woman who made those tangy, sweet squares that stuck to your teeth and heart just the same. I still make them, every Sunday, like clockwork. Even now, even when there's no one to eat them but me. My girls, Andrea and Denise, grew up in that church kitchen. They'd sit on the folding chairs with their socked feet swinging, waiting for the last hymn so we could go home. Back then, I could make them laugh with a crooked smile and a silly song. Now, it takes weeks for them to return a phone call. Their father, Frank, died in '78. Just dropped one day, middle of a Tuesday, from a massive stroke. He was 41. I still remember what I was wearing when they called. A red cardigan he gave me for Christmas in '75. The one with the pearl buttons. I'm wearing it now, actually. It's threadbare under the arms and a little faded, but I don't mind. It smells like memory. Like warm tobacco and aqua velva. It reminds me of the girl I used to be when I was loved every day, not just remembered on holidays. After Frank died, I did what women like me were expected to do. I worked, stretched pennies, and gave my girls everything I could. I sewed curtains at night, watched neighbor kids after school for a few dollars, and skipped more meals than I can count just to pay for their violin lessons and summer camps. I never took a vacation, not once. I always told myself one day when they're grown, they'll take me somewhere nice, somewhere warm, maybe Florida, but that day never came. What did come was cancer. Spring of 2001. I found the lump on my left side while folding laundry. I didn't tell the girls until after the surgery was scheduled. Denise said, "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" But when the day came, she couldn't get off work. Andrea texted from the car, "Thinking of you, Mom. Hope it goes well." I told myself it was fine. I told myself they were busy. But sitting alone in the recovery room with my hospital socks rolled down and an IV drip humming above me, I felt it. That empty chair at my bedside has never left me. After the cancer scare, I tried to move on. I returned to church within 2 weeks of finishing radiation, wrapped in scarves and half the weight I used to be. Folks clapped when I walked in, but my girls didn't. They never came with me again. After that. "Sundays are our only rest days, Mom," Andrea said. Denise just said nothing, as she often does when it's easier to look away. Still, I convinced myself it was enough to be needed, even if I wasn't always seen. I offered to babysit when their kids were sick. I canceled bridge nights and doctor appointments if they needed someone to wait for the cable guy or pick up dry cleaning. When flu season hit, I kept the kids for days while they ran meetings or traveled. I didn't mind. Really, I didn't. You see, I had this idea. This little lie I told myself for years. If I stay useful, they'll keep me close. So I stayed useful, even when my back hurt, even when I couldn't feel the tips of my fingers after standing too long at the stove. I stayed useful when Denise called me at 5 a.m. to ask if I could pop over and pack lunches because she forgot she had an early meeting. I was at her door by 5:20. When did I stop being a mother and become staff? I never asked that out loud. Not until recently, not until that afternoon in late October, just 3 weeks before my 80th birthday, when I heard them in the kitchen, my own flesh and blood, speaking like I wasn't there. I was putting away laundry in the hallway when the words floated over from the open door. "She wants a party at that age. She can't expect us to organize everything. We've got lives. Maybe we just take her out to lunch or something quick, no big fuss." I stood still, holding a stack of neatly folded towels. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't tremble. It was worse than that. I felt numb, the kind of numb that settles into your bones, makes you question if you imagined everything good that ever was. Later that evening, I tried one more time. I set 2 mugs of peppermint tea on the kitchen table, just me and Andrea that night. And I said gently, I thought maybe just a small gathering, nothing grand, just some cake and music. I could make the apricot squares even. She didn't even look up from her phone. "Don't bother us, Mom. We're busy that weekend." I smiled again, folded the napkin, took a sip of my tea. But deep down, a quiet part of me whispered, "Then maybe it's time I stop bothering." The next morning, I sat at the little desk in my bedroom, the one Frank built from pinewood scraps back when we couldn't afford a proper one. The top still bears the ring of his old coffee mug. I opened the bottom drawer, the one I rarely touch these days, and found what I was looking for, a small white box with a pale pink ribbon. Inside were a dozen unused birthday invitations from 5 years ago, my 75th. I had bought them in advance, hopeful, but the girls said that year was too hectic, so we never sent them. I didn't have the heart to throw them away. Funny how we save disappointment in boxes like it's something precious. I ran my fingers over the front of the top card. A watercolor teacup, a bit of glitter in the steam, the words, "Join us for a special celebration." I almost laughed. Almost. That afternoon, Trudy came by. She's my housekeeper. Twice a week, helps with mopping, some laundry, the windows I can't reach anymore. But she's more than that, really. She talks to me, looks at me, like I'm still a person. "Hey there, hun," she said, stepping in and brushing leaves off her coat. "You okay today? You seem, I don't know, quieter than usual." I shook my head. "I'm just tired." She didn't press, just nodded like she knew. Sometimes kindness is in the silence. While she vacuumed the den, I sat at the kitchen table staring at a single invitation I had taken out. I thought about who would even come now. Most of my old friends have passed, and the few still around don't drive at night. But maybe a small afternoon tea. Something simple. No one had to help. I'd do it myself. I always have. I got up and opened the pantry. There was still a jar of dried apricots from last winter, some sugar, a half-used bag of flour, enough to make a tray or two of my squares, and I had paper napkins left from Easter, lavender with little tulips. They'd do just fine. And then, as I pulled the red cardigan tighter around me, I felt it. Not hope, exactly, but a kind of quiet resolve. A new script was forming in my head. If they're too busy to celebrate me, then maybe I'll celebrate myself. It wasn't bitterness, not yet. It was something else. A soft, sad practicality. Like patching a hole in a favorite quilt. You know it'll never be the same, but you fix it anyway. That evening, I placed the single invitation card in the center of the table and just stared at it while the sun set behind the dusty blinds. The house was silent, save for the low hum of the refrigerator. But in my mind, I could almost hear laughter again. Distant, faded, like it came from another lifetime. The next few days moved slowly, like honey down a cold spoon. I found myself moving through the house with a kind of methodical numbness, dusting frames, folding linens, checking the pantry, not because I needed anything, but because it gave my hands something to do. My thoughts stayed quiet but sharp, like glass under water. One morning, while organizing the hall closet, I came across an old notebook, hardcover, floral print, spiral binding, long bent out of shape. It was my event planner from years ago, back when I used to help coordinate bake sales and retirement parties for the church. I flipped through pages of forgotten phone numbers, recipe conversions, and scribbled to-do lists. Then I stopped at one particular page, bold, underlined, dated, 75th birthday ideas, music, Doris Day, finger sandwiches, tea lights in jars. I felt the tears rising but blinked them back. I had already cried over this birthday once before. I wouldn't do it again. That night, I sat down with a pen and a pad of paper. Nothing fancy, just one of those yellow legal pads you get 3 for $1. I wrote out a guest list. Only a dozen names came to mind, but each one mattered. Mrs. Feldman from 2 doors down. She still calls me young lady, even though she's 91. Lucille from church. Her knees are bad, but her voice still shakes the stained glass when she sings Amazing Grace. Trudy, of course. I didn't even need to ask. I knew she'd show up, maybe even bring napkins with little gold stars on them like she did for her own birthday last May. And then, just out of a sense of morbid fairness, I listed Andrea and Denise, my daughters. I wrote their names in the margins, not the main list. I told myself it wasn't out of spite. It was just honest. They were never the guests. They were supposed to be the hosts. By Friday, I had circled a date. Sunday, November 12th, 2 p.m., 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. Early enough that no one could claim to be too busy with the holidays. I didn't expect much. A few laughs, some familiar faces, maybe a hand squeeze or two. But I wanted something. I needed something. Not a grand gesture. Not even validation. Just acknowledgement. Just a moment where I could be seen, not as an obligation, but as a person. I took out one of the old invitations and began filling in the blanks with my neatest cursive, the kind Sister Helen taught me back in 1952. My hands trembled just slightly as I signed my name. Warmly, Margaret Carrington. The following Monday, I mailed out the invitations. I hand-delivered 3 of them. Mrs. Feldman's, Lucille's, and one for Mr. Harris, the retired postman, who always waves when I water the front hedges. The rest I slipped into the blue mailbox at the end of the block, the one near the old diner where Frank and I used to get grilled cheese and split a slice of cherry pie. On Tuesday, I sent a group message to the family chat, short, polite, neutral. Hosting a small birthday tea on the 12th, 2 p.m., home-cooked sweets, old music, nothing too fancy. You're welcome to join. Let me know. There was no reply that day, or the next, not even an emoji. But I saw the read mark under Andrea's name, and Denise's 3 dots blinked for a moment, then vanished. That night I couldn't sleep. I laid in bed listening to the house creak and shift around me, like it was also tired of being ignored. The red cardigan was folded neatly on the chair beside me. I reached over and held it to my chest, like I used to hold Frank's arm when he snored too loud. It smelled faintly of lavender and old wood, and just for a second, I didn't feel so invisible. Trudy came by the next morning and noticed the invitation on the fridge. "That your birthday party?" she asked, raising her eyebrows with a grin. I nodded. "Just something small." She tapped the card lightly. "You want me to bring anything? I got a cute serving tray shaped like a sunflower." I smiled, genuinely, for once. "Just bring yourself. And maybe those lemon cookies you make." As she packed up her cleaning supplies, she looked at me for a beat longer than usual. "You sure you're all right, hun? You've got that look again." "What look?" "The one people get when they've been hoping too long." I wanted to answer her, to explain how you can still love someone who forgets you exist until they need something, but instead I just said, "I'm all right, really." She nodded, but didn't look convinced. That evening, as I was sorting through old linens, I heard my phone buzz, a text from Denise. "Hey, Mom, just FYI, we didn't promise to pay for any party stuff, right? Just want to be clear before you go buying a bunch of things." I stared at the message for a long time, not because it hurt, though it did, but because it confirmed something I hadn't let myself believe. They didn't forget. They just didn't care. I didn't reply. I simply opened the kitchen drawer, pulled out an envelope, and wrote her name on the front in the same script I used for the invitations. No stamp yet, no total either, but something told me I'd be needing both. November came in like a soft hush. Gray skies, bare, trees, the kind of wind that rattled the windows just enough to make the house feel too big. I marked the days on my kitchen calendar in red ink, each one leading to the 12th. That first week, I cashed in a savings bond I'd held on to since 1998. Frank had bought it after one of my gallbladder attacks, saying it was for something special when the time feels right. I figured he wouldn't mind. I used the money to rent 10 folding chairs and a portable speaker. The man at the rental place called it overkill, but I told him softly, "You've never been invisible at your own birthday." I spent hours sorting through linens. I picked the yellow tablecloth with embroidered daisies, hand-stitched by my mother sometime in the 1960s. I washed the tea set that only came out for holidays, even the chipped creamer jug, especially the chipped creamer jug. In the evenings, I sat at my desk and wrote little name cards by hand. I had to rest my wrist every few lines. The arthritis was worse lately. Still, I wanted every detail to be thoughtful. It felt like the last party I'd ever throw. One night, I opened the small keepsake box I keep on the shelf above my closet. Inside were birthday cards from over the years, mostly from my daughters. I laid them out on the bed in chronological order. At first, they were warm, full of "We love you, Mom," and messy crayon drawings from the grandkids. Over time, the handwriting got sharper, the messages shorter. "Have a good day. Hope you're well. Sorry we missed your call. Next week?" I didn't cry. I just stared, like I was reading a story I already knew the ending to. Across the hall, the foil birthday balloon I had bought weeks ago was beginning to curl at the corners. It was still in its packaging, untouched. I leaned it against the wall by the front door. A part of me kept hoping someone would notice it, ask about it, offer to blow it up. No one did. 3 days before the party, I sent one more message in the group chat. "Sunday the 12th, 3 p.m., cake and tea, hope to see you." It showed "delivered." That was it. No reply. That night, I called my granddaughter, Emma. She was always the sweetest of them. Quiet, thoughtful, the kind who used to draw me birthday cards with puffy stickers and glitter pens. "Oh, Grandma," she said, drawing out the syllables like they weighed something. "I think I have a school project. I'll let you know." She didn't ask what kind of cake I was making. She didn't even ask who was coming. I hung up, walked to the kitchen, and started pulling ingredients for the apricot squares. As I stirred the filling on the stove, something inside me hardened. Not into anger, but into clarity. It was the same clarity I'd had once in 1983 when I realized no one was going to fix the leaky roof except me, so I fixed it. And now it was my party, so I'd host it, with or without them. 2 days before the party, my phone rang around lunchtime. It was Denise. "Hey, Mom, quick question. Just want to make sure we didn't promise to pay for any of this birthday stuff, right?" There was no greeting. "No. How are you feeling, Mom? Just business." I paused, letting her words settle in the air. I looked down at my hands, floured from the morning's baking, wrists sore, apron wrinkled. I had just finished my second tray of apricot squares. "No," I said, you didn't promise." "Okay, good. Just wanted to be clear. We're on a really tight budget right now, and I don't want anyone feeling awkward." I almost said something. Almost asked if tight budget included the $800 stroller I saw on her Facebook last week, or the new backyard fire pit set she posted with a "Our Blessed" caption. But I didn't. I've learned that silence, when used properly, can be more dignified than any scolding. "All right, then," she said. "Hope it goes well." Then the line went dead. I stood in the kitchen a while, listening to the ticking clock above the stove. Then I walked to the side table and pulled out the envelopes I'd prepared earlier. Plain white, no return address. Each one had a name neatly written in cursive. Andrea, Denise, Emma. Inside each envelope was a small slip of paper. Not an invoice, not really. More like a summary of expenses. I'd listed the cost of each item they once said they'd help cover. Folding chairs, tea service, food, decorations, divided evenly by 3. At the bottom, in tiny script, I had written, "As agreed, with love, Mom." I hadn't planned to send them, but now I wasn't so sure. That evening, I set the dining room table. Alone. 10 place settings. I unfolded the daisy tablecloth and pressed it flat with my hands. I laid out mismatched china plates and tiny glass cups I had collected from thrift stores over the years. I lit 2 tall candles in brass holders, heirlooms from my mother's house in Indiana. One of them leaned slightly to the left, but I liked that. It felt honest. The balloon still sat by the door, unopened. It looked thinner than before, like even in its packaging it could sense the tension in the air. I left it there. A small, unspoken dare. I went to the mirror in the hallway and tried on my red cardigan. The buttons still held. Barely. The left sleeve had a snag, but I smoothed it gently with my palm. "Still good enough," I whispered. Mr. Beans, my old mutt of 12 years, padded up and leaned into my leg. I bent down to scratch behind his ear. "We're gonna be okay, huh?" I said. "Even if it's just us." He wagged his tail once and sat at my feet like he understood. That night, I went to bed early, but didn't sleep. I lay awake in the quiet, the kind that hums louder the longer it stretches, and I thought about how strange it is the way some people disappear from your life, not all at once, but by fractions. A missed call, a late reply, a shrug instead of a hug. By the time you notice, there's almost nothing left. The morning of November 12th dawned chilly but clear, the kind of cold that bit your fingertips but made the sun feel like a blessing. I rose early, earlier than usual, and let the kettle boil while Mr. Beans dozed by the heater. I moved slowly but purposefully. I put on my nicest blouse, the cream-colored one with the lace collar, then the red cardigan. I used a lint brush to get the dog hair off as best I could. My reflection in the hallway mirror didn't shock me. I looked old, yes, but not forgotten. Not today. By 1:30, the house had changed. It felt lighter. The daisy tablecloth was smooth. The apricot squares were plated in neat rows, and the old radio in the corner softly played Ella Fitzgerald's Cheek to Cheek. I'd made cucumber tea sandwiches, deviled eggs, and a small punch bowl with cranberry ginger ale. Nothing extravagant, just enough to say, "This matters." Trudy arrived first, holding a paper bouquet of crepe flowers and a warm apple cobbler that smelled like autumn in a dish. "You look like a birthday queen," she smiled. I laughed, embarrassed but grateful. I feel more like the castle staff. Soon after came Lucille from church, then Mrs. Feldman with her walker and her sharp little eyes that missed nothing. Mr. Harris showed up in a corduroy blazer and brought a plastic tub of ginger snaps. We had 10 guests in all, 10 souls who remembered, who showed up. And that was enough. Someone asked to take a photo. Trudy pulled out a Polaroid camera and snapped a picture of me on the couch with Mr. Beans in my lap, my arm gently resting on the arm of the chair. The red cardigan glowed like an ember. I laughed without thinking, not the tired chuckle I usually gave my daughters on the phone, but a real laugh, one that shook my ribs. We passed around the punch, sang a gentle "Happy Birthday," and Lucille led everyone in a verse of "What a friend we have in Jesus." My hands trembled during the high notes, but I held them together. At 3:45, just as the guests were finishing their cake, the door creaked open. Andrea's daughter, Emma, stood there, backlit by the cold daylight. Alone. "Did we miss it?" she asked, glancing inside. "Sorry, Mom didn't really explain. I just got dropped off." She looked around awkwardly, then stepped in. She didn't take her coat off. From her purse, she pulled out a small envelope. "Happy birthday, Grandma." Inside was a grocery store gift card, $10 credit, no note, no hug. "Mom said you probably needed basics," she added, avoiding my eyes. I nodded, thanked her softly, and excused myself to the kitchen. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stood by the sink and stared at the envelope in my hand. When the last guest left around 5 p.m., I lit the 2 brass candle holders again, now melted halfway down. I sat at the table, alone, and took out the 3 white envelopes with my daughters' names on them. I added one more. Emma. Inside each, I tucked a copy of the handwritten cost summary. Tea, chairs, food, decorations, divided evenly. Then I placed the gift card beside the stack of envelopes, and in my neatest handwriting, I wrote on each, "As promised, your contribution to my birthday celebration. Thank you." I didn't send the envelopes that night. I left them on the dining room table next to the now empty punch bowl and a napkin someone had folded into the shape of a swan. I wanted to sit with the moment a little longer. The house smelled faintly of lemon oil and vanilla. The daisy tablecloth had a faint jam stain on the corner. Lucille's doing, I was sure. The Polaroid Trudy had taken sat propped against the salt shaker. I looked tired in it, but not broken. I saw something in my eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. Stillness, not peace, exactly. Not yet. But something close. The next morning, I woke early, made tea, and fed Mr. Beans. I didn't check my phone. I didn't need to. I already knew what kind of silence would be waiting there. By noon, I had placed stamps on the envelopes. Each one felt heavier than it should have, like the weight of what they symbolized had settled deep into the paper fibers. Just as I reached for my coat, the phone rang. It was Andrea. "Mom, what is this?" she snapped. No hello, no breath. "I got your letter. An invoice? Are you serious?" I stayed quiet, letting the silence stretch just long enough to feel like steel between us. "This is passive-aggressive, Mother. We never agreed to anything." "You said you'd help." "Months ago," I replied, my voice calm. "Help doesn't mean fund a whole tea party. Why are you making a scene over something so small?" That word, small, landed like a slap. I looked at the red cardigan hanging from the chair, at the list of groceries I had saved for weeks just to afford, at the empty chairs that were supposed to hold my family. Small. "It wasn't small to me," I said, voice steady. 80 isn't a footnote." "Unbelievable," she muttered. "This is manipulation." "Then don't pay it," I replied. "Ignore it, like you did the invitation." She hung up. Denise's text came an hour later. "Real mature, Mom. Way to ruin the one weekend we had off." That was it. No question about how the party went. No happy birthday. Not even a period at the end of the sentence. Emma didn't reply at all. I stared at my phone for a long time before finally powering it off. I placed it in the kitchen drawer underneath the old coupons and rubber bands I keep for no good reason. Then I took the Polaroid photo, slid it into a frame I found in the hall closet, and placed it on the mantel. Me, Mr. Beans, and the faint glow of 2 brass candles behind us. Before bed, I opened my address book and circled 3 names: Andrea, Denise, Emma. Then I took out a pen and drew a clean, deliberate line through each one. Just once. Not with anger, with clarity. The week after the party was quiet, not the kind of silence that aches, but the kind that settles, the kind that lets you hear yourself think again. I had expected backlash, and I got it. Andrea called once more 3 days after the envelopes were delivered. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Tight, clipped. "You've really embarrassed yourself, Mom. I don't know what point you were trying to make, but congratulations. You've made things uncomfortable for everyone." I listened to it twice, then deleted it. Not in anger, I just didn't need to keep it. Denise sent one final text. "You always talk about family and then pull a stunt like this. Passive-aggressive much?" This time, I answered, "I learned from the best." Then I blocked both of their numbers. It took me a few minutes to find the setting on my old flip phone. My fingers fumbled and the screen kept going dark. I called Trudy the next morning and asked if she could help me set up a new system, something with call blocking and volume control. She came that same afternoon. "You finally doing it, huh?" she asked, unplugging the landline with a grunt. "Doing what?" "Choosing peace." I smiled. About time. We sat on the floor for nearly an hour, sorting through wires and instruction booklets. At one point, she held up a user manual and read aloud, using a fake British accent. We laughed like teenagers sneaking into a movie. I hadn't laughed like that in years. Once it was set up, she tested the line with her own phone. When it worked, we both clapped. I offered her a slice of leftover cobbler, and we ate on the porch in silence, watching the squirrels raid my bird feeder like it was a buffet. Later that night, I took a small stack of postcards from the drawer, leftovers from my trip to the botanical garden 3 summers ago. I wrote thank you notes to each guest who came to the party. I used my best handwriting. "Thank you for making me feel remembered," with warmth. Margaret. I even wrote one to Emma. I didn't know if it would mean anything, but I couldn't bring myself to cross her out completely. Not yet. I didn't say anything about the gift card or the party, or just wrote, "I was glad to see your face." Then I slipped it into the mailbox and didn't think about it again. The days that followed felt different. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just freer. I walked more. I opened the windows. I signed up for a ceramics class at the senior center, Thursday afternoons. The instructor's name is Calvin, and he wears 2 watches for reasons no one understands. I like him. I started volunteering again at the library, shelving returns and recommending cookbooks to people who reminded me of younger versions of myself. I felt useful again, but this time not to be loved, just to be alive. Then something unexpected happened. The local pastor, Reverend Daniel from St. Luke's, called me. He said he'd heard about the party from Lucille. "She said it was lovely and long overdue. I just wanted you to know we were thinking of you that day." We talked for 10 minutes. He didn't preach. He didn't pity. He just listened. Before hanging up, he added, "Margaret, sometimes reclaiming joy is the most radical thing a person can do. You did good." It was the kindest thing anyone had said to me in years. 2 days later, Mrs. Feldman's grandson dropped off a package. It was wrapped in plain brown paper and tied with string. Inside was a wooden picture frame, painted soft yellow with tiny daisies carved into the corners. He said, "Gran wanted you to have this. She says it's your sunshine frame." I knew exactly what to put in it. I slid in the Polaroid, the one Trudy took at the party. Me in the red cardigan. Mr. Beans curled at my feet, the candles glowing faintly behind me, my mouth mid-laugh, my eyes crinkled in a way that said, "I'm still here." I placed it on the hallway table, right where the foil balloon had sat for weeks, unopened and unused. I never did inflate it. I threw it away the same day I mailed the invoices because some things are meant to rise, others are meant to let go. That picture? It reminded me of something important. I didn't need decorations to feel worthy. I didn't need approval to be celebrated. And I didn't need to be invited to matter. It's been 14 months since the party. The sun still rises through the same kitchen window. Mr. Bean still waits by the door every morning for his short walk, tail wagging like clockwork. The Polaroid on the hallway table has faded slightly, but I leave it there. It's not just a memory. It's proof. I haven't unblocked their numbers, not out of spite, out of mercy, for myself. From time to time, messages reach me through others. Trudy will casually mention, "Your daughter was asking about you," or Mrs. Feldman will say, "That young girl, Emma, I think, she dropped off a book at the library and said hello." Sometimes the messages are polite. Sometimes they're coated in guilt. "Can we talk? She misses you, you know." They didn't mean it like that. But none of them ever say the one thing I waited years to hear. We were wrong. And so, I stay silent, not because I'm angry, but because I'm free. For the first time in decades, my life belongs to me. I go to ceramics on Thursdays, even though I'm terrible at it. I read mysteries and skip ahead to the last chapter when I'm impatient. I plant herbs in little clay pots and give them silly names. I let myself become a person again. Not a role, not a task, not a burden. Last month, I went to get a new state ID. They made me take a photo. I almost wore my usual coat, but at the last minute, I pulled out the red cardigan. It's threadbare now, frayed at the cuffs and unraveling under the left arm. But I wore it anyway, one last time. When I looked at the photo on the tiny screen, I didn't see someone old or forgotten. I saw someone whole, not healed necessarily, but aware. I once believed family meant sacrifice, that love meant always saying yes even when it hurt, that my value came from what I gave. But now I know better. Real love isn't silent when you're in pain. Real love shows up. Real love says you matter, not because you're useful, but because you're here. That lesson took me 80 years to learn, but it was worth the wait. This morning, I sat on my porch with a mug of black tea, watching the light change on the sidewalk. Mr. Beans lay curled at my feet, snoring softly. A breeze moved through the hydrangeas. I wasn't thinking of the past. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I was just being. And sometimes when you stop waiting to be needed, you realize being forgotten is what finally lets you remember yourself. Have you ever seen someone go through something like this? I'd be honored to hear your story.